Thank you. There is no greater peace than being loved so completely that the whole of your life is held in love's sweet embrace. Universalism is a theology that reminds us we are all worthy of divine love in this interconnected web of existence. Imagine a holy shrugging off of our many human faults and a cosmic love so big that it will leave us breathless. In my last year of seminary, I gratefully received a generous scholarship from the St. Lawrence Foundation for theological education. And as a condition of that scholarship, I was asked to research historical and contemporary universalism and then write a sermon. The nerd in me perked up as if you had to ask. My way to ministry had been paved by Olympia Brown, the first female Universalist minister to graduate from seminary. St. Lawrence was then a university. Unlike me, with many to support my efforts, she faced discouragement, but kept moving ahead. The parishes she tended were losing money, losing faith, and she relished the challenge of being with them. She made her mark on the suffragette movement too, riding from town to town, giving speeches. Her work was tireless, but she lived to see it come to fruition, lucky for us all. And what an ancestor on whose brave shoulders I am now held. There will be a lot of God talk in this sermon. Our ancestors used it, and I will too. Don't hold a picture of anything in particular when you hear the word, neither male nor female. Perhaps think of it as a rich source, like a fountain, or as I'll share later, like sunlight through cathedral windows, or like the earth's wet womb. So now a bit of history. Our story of modern universalism begins in the 1700s in London with a man named James Relly. And he published an article that disposed of the idea that Jesus died to save only a select few. Those who became his followers were known as Relliites. And those are the folks our Universalist ancestor John Murray met and whose ideas he brought with him to New England. Yet Murray found himself more aligned with the Baptists and the Quakers and other Calvinist dissenting groups whose emotional religion the Unitarians found distasteful. Well, most of us can understand how Murray and our ancestors identified with Quakers. We sing the song, "'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be." But the Baptists, the barefoot revivalists, both my parents were brought up Baptist, and my father describes revivals as a lot of hollering and carrying on. My mother admits to finding the revivals fascinating, even though when she went down to Alabama, her cousins weren't allowed to wear bathing suits in that hot, hot sun. But funny to have this thread to my past. Maybe I've turned and come round right. Now, not all, but most Universalists weren't the elite of Massachusetts. Many were salt of the earth types, people like me. It became plain as day to our Universalist ancestors that God was too good to damn humanity, or, as Calvin claimed, that only an elect few got to join God's heavenly hosts. Hadn't humanity had enough of the privileged few in England? No more. Welcome to a loving God. And then here is where our faithful ancestors part ways, as the Baptists use their, as my dad put it, hollering and carrying on to emphasize smoting and damnation. In his sermon, Dragged into Heaven Kicking and Screaming, the Reverend Mark Morrison Reed says about universalism, this was a religion of radical, overpowering love. Universal salvation insists that no matter what we do, God loves us, that she will not and cannot consign a single living human individual to eternal damnation. She loves us so much that she cannot consign a single human individual. Universal salvation is the consequence of universal love. The recognition that love is the grounding and the basis of all. He goes on to say, well, why use the language of love to describe this? How else would we describe that which created, undergirds, and sustains us? He also says that UUs dismiss the notion of God and those who speak of it. We've heard that these days. We tend to be more comfortable when we're working through the unknowables of life in our heads rather than seeking the intuition of our hearts. Morrison Reed defines God this way. He says, God is the unknowable, unfathomable, and ineffable that is as close as the next heartbeat, as ordinary as a mote of dust, and as precious as a newborn. God is the transcendent mystery at the core of all things. And when I first heard his sermon, I admit to having listened to it many, many times, I thought that my knees would buckle. As ordinary as a mote of dust, as precious as a newborn. When I was an undergraduate at Richmond, Virginia, I dated a student who lived in the working class neighborhood near the university. The neighborhood butted up against a 6-lane road which separated it from the brick and wire of the Virginia State Penitentiary. On the night that Randy Boggs was scheduled to be executed, all the lights outside the prison in the street were turned off. And everyone in the neighborhood did the same. And we all came out on our front porches to sit. It was summertime, but it was as quiet as a snowstorm. Even the dogs that roamed the dangerous packs around the neighborhood hunkered down out of sight. We waited. Just recently, I learned audio tapes were found from many of the executions at that now closed prison, and Boggs's was one. They were waiting to see if the governor would call and offer a pardon, and the staff were trying to be sure the phone system worked. No pardon came, and from inside my boyfriend's house, we heard the appliances hiss and spit. The porch lights flickered. The air was charged. What horror. Now, Boggs was no peach. He admitted to some horrible doings. And yet nobody that night cheered or uttered a word, not until one old man we called Apple Butter, who must have slipped up on the porch steps in the dark, said, well, I guess that's it. And I didn't know Universalism then, but since I do now, I will say that I felt its tug that night. I felt connected to all humanity, the people on their porches over in the prison, Randy Boggs. And John Murray would have us know that Boggs is also saved, like it or not. God did not turn away from him, not then and not before. Whether Boggs was dragged or opened his arms to receive that divine mercy, I couldn't say. Well, I'll tell you another story. I love caves, and I wanted to include their exploration as a spiritual metaphor in a book I was working on. So I traveled around Virginia, finding my way into as many as I could. One was the Grand Caverns and Grottos, Virginia. And now in the 1920s, decadence found the Grand Cavern. Down came the party goers into what they named the Chandelier Room. It's the main hall with the nubs of stalactites holding fast to the ceiling and dripping towards the tiny eggs on the floor. where the women's pumps and the men's shoes didn't notice. And then the people lit the pathway from the entrance with waxy candles and braced their oily hands against the wall, flung their spit and whiskey and cigarettes into the pools of transparent fish and tiny microbes. They brought bands and used the broad stalagmite at the edge of the dance floor like a cocktail table, deadening its growth and that of its partner directly above. Now, before those roaring partygoers came the soldiers of the Civil War, both Union and Confederate. How each found the mouth of that cave at different times and then crawled in for safety and comfort is a mystery still. They too left themselves behind. They etched their names into the flat wall a ways off from the wide open chandelier room. Names, regiments, captains. They listed the names of those who had fallen, the names of mothers and lovers they hoped to see again. They left their prayers. And unlike what you might imagine, nobody crossed out the names of another. There were no curses above Grant or Burnside, no crude graphics. Why was that? Whatever wet solace that cave afforded, whatever holiness lay hidden in the mother belly of earth that had offered salvation to all of them, neither child soldier better than any other. Both sides were embraced equally. Did they feel it like that? I did when I stood there. I felt the rush of divine love like a breath of good air, as cavers say, when the opening of a cavern is nearby, or another path to the mouth of the karst. I realized we are all the same down here in the dark. And by all the same, I mean it in the universalist way. We share the same source of love, and our destinies are bound to each other, like the stalactite and the stalagmite dripping and building their way towards one another for as long as it takes. Well, you can tell I've been casting around for metaphors, searching my past for stories that shape the theology of universalism. In doing so, I found my way to the words of Reverend Forrest Church. He says, to the universalist, truth in religion is like truth in poetry. Our common text is creation. By whatever name we call its author or co-creator, we are all interpreters of the poetry of God. We are all interpreters of the poetry of God. This world is our common text. We are co-creating this one small part of the world right now, me and you. How do we interpret this poetry? It keeps coming at us. It comes in the leafless tangle of branches painted against a gray sky, in the brief flash of a salamander tail slipping behind a rock, or the cat flicking its tail in its owner's lap on our Zoom screens. This poetry arrives in the throats of migrating geese, in the salted seaweed tangled on the sand at Ledbetter Point, on and on, on and on. We just can't keep this to ourselves, even if I experience things differently than you do. Reverend Church is the co-creator of the metaphor that you might have heard before. He calls it the cathedral of the world. In that great cathedral, there are many windows made of colored glass in every sort of design imaginable. There's light coming in through the windows, and the light comes from one source. But once it shines through all those windows and catches the light within each of us, there are many, many ways to describe what we see, what we feel about what we see. And if we close our eyes or we have no sight, we feel the light upon us, within us, and recite our poetry. Regardless of whether our interpretations of the poetry of God are filled today with sun and flower, or with the calls of a broken man for his mother. There will never be one type of poem only. God knows this, and you know too. The universalist idea of God's love is a little like how it is when you squeeze your child or your cat, when you smooch like that, and then they have their arms stiff, pushing away. That's like mother love, like the Paul Simon song. My mama loves me. She loves me. She gets down on her knees and hugs me. She loves me like a rock. Big, embracing, unconditional. You can't escape love like that. There isn't a single thing you can do to diminish it. And anyway, why would you want to? Better let those stiff arms go limp and succumb. Let it wash over you, and bring you blessed peace. Amen to that.